pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just wanted to let everyone know, unfortunately, our audio-visual equipment was not cooperating this evening, so we don't have any microphones. So we'll try to talk as loud as we can. If you can't hear us in the back, just kind of let us know. I know it's difficult with masks on as well. So first on our agenda this evening, we do have two presentations. The first one is from Greg Evans, and he's from Bonadillo and Company.
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Okay. I know it's an exciting day when the auditor comes. So what I did this year, I'm not sure if I've done this in the past or not. So that top package that you have on the front there is a summary of the audit results. So it'll kind of help us move through the various reports kind of quickly. But obviously feel free to stop me if you have questions. So over on the table of contents are the listing of what we did. We did an audit of the financial statements. That audit was performed in accordance with government auditing standards. And we did an audit of the extra classroom activity funds. So if we flip over to Part A, Independent Auditor's Report, I always point out that these financial statements are yours. The numbers are yours. It's my job to help you assemble them and give you an opinion on those financial statements. And that opinion is at the bottom there. It's an unmodified opinion, which means that we believe that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. That's a clean opinion. That's the opinion that you're looking for. I will point out that we did adopt a new accounting standard this year, which I'll give you a little bit more detail about in a couple minutes here. On the next page, you'll see some of the required communications, which are sensitive estimates. Obviously, the useful life of capital assets, your net pension liability, your other post-employment benefits, those are all estimates which are subject to change every year. Moving on to the next page, the first bullet there is, I think, the most important one. There were no proposed audit adjustments, which means the numbers that you've been looking at all year are the numbers that ended up in your financial statements. Obviously, what you're looking for, if we're coming in and making millions of dollars with the journal entries, then you have to kind of question what you're looking at throughout the year. So, good place to be. No disagreements with management. We're required to report that. Flipping over to the financial statement highlights. Statement of net position. I always point this out. This is an accumulation of all of the district's assets and liabilities, long-term and short-term. At the bottom of that, you would see that you're in a deficit of 36 million, which, as I say every year, can be certainly alarming when you think about that. But that second bullet there kind of explains that. Your OPEB liabilities are your retiree health insurance, which amounted to over $63 million. And what that number is that's a calculation of what you expect to pay for all of your both current and retired employees for retiree health. So obviously not due in the next year, it's due over the entire life of those employees. So although it's a giant number, it's nothing to worry about. Okay, moving on. The next page, we'll talk about the general fund a little bit. We always talk about fund balance. Your fund balance went up by $400,000 this year. Your unassigned fund balance was $712,000, which puts you at 2.89% of next year's budget, which of course is key to meeting the New York State regulation of 4%. So you're under that, not a problem there. A lot of our districts have had trouble with that this past year. When we go down to your budget to actual, you actually had a variance from budget to actual of about 1.5 million, which we've seen with a lot of districts, especially on the expenditure side of things. Obviously, with the pandemic, you just couldn't spend like you used to, what you planned for. So obviously that number came in a lot lower than your budget.
Could I ask you a question?
Yes.
Can you just review general fund balance and budget to actual in more lay terms?
Layman's.
Yeah.
Just so we understand a little bit better.
So that fund balance, the unassigned fund balance, that's your 712,000 I've listed there.
Okay.
That's your savings account essentially. That's not associated with anything. Your restricted fund balance are all your reserves, for whether it's capital or, employee retirement payments or, whatever you've decided to put reserves into essentially. And then the assigned fund balance is basically funds that you've set aside out of your fund balance for the current year. So those are the three major categories there. And again, revenues were favorable, expenditures were favorable. You wound up with a giant budget to actual variance of about 1.5 million.
What's that mean?
Well, so you had actually planned to use fund balance, and you actually came out ahead. So again, more revenues than you anticipated, less expenditures than you anticipated, which is extremely common across the state. Especially with New York State, there was a lot of uncertainty as to the level of funding. Eventually, it all came through though. So that's essentially what happened with a lot of that. And the expenditures, whether it's pupil services or transportation, all came in significantly below budget.
Thank you, Greg.
Is that 1.5, does that include federal money that we may have received?
Yep, that's everything. So
Okay.
that's your total, what you had budgeted for versus what you actually wound up with.
So you're not scolding us.
No, that's good. You're in good shape.
Good job, Charlie.
Over onto the next page, that prior period adjustment that I referred to is the implementation of GASB 84. And really all that's related to is us moving the payroll withholdings from the fiduciary funds into your general fund, and also moving your extra classroom activities into your governmental funds. Nothing changed with regard to those. It's just a physical placement of those. So not a big deal there, but also required to point that out. So those are the highlights of the financial statements. Parts B and C are related to internal controls, or Part B is related to internal controls. Happy to report there's no findings there. We come in and we look to see whether those controls are still in place and operating effectively, designed correctly. Again, kudos to Charlie for making sure that those are still working. And then Part C is related to those extra classroom activities that were required to audit. No findings there. We did send Charlie some management letter comments, which are just best practices, essentially pointing out, some of the small discrepancies that quite frankly we expect to see whenever you have students involved in accounting work. Obviously not a big deal there. Pretty common across the state when we look at these extra classroom funds. In fact, I'd be a little bit skeptical if I didn't have some findings there, whether the students were actually involved. And that's not a knock on anyone, but accounting is hard, let's put it that way. So that's the very quick overview of the financial statements and auditor's reports. Any questions? And I know you just received that packet tonight, so as I always say, if you go through it and there's things that come up, Charlie knows how to get a hold of me. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just asked my colleague, Mr. Nelson, when the state controller comes in, if he does, or his office comes in, her office comes in, do they audit your report or something from the district?
No, they're going to audit the district's numbers, and they're going to do their own thing, essentially. I mean, they'll look at what I have here, but they like to do their own thing.
How often does that happen?
Is it every 5?
Yeah, I think they try to get there every 5 years. I think they were here a couple years ago.
2 years ago.
Procurement,
Yep.
specifically for procurement.
Procurement, yeah.
Okay, everybody's good?
Yes.
Yeah?
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presentation on the agenda is from Stephen Abramsky from C&S Companies. Hi, how are you?
Doing quite well. How about yourself?
Good.
I'll move right up the front row here.
Sure.
Well, thank you all for taking the time to come out. We weren't sure everyone was going to make it with that weather. It was a little hairy there for a while. My name is Jim Alcott. I'm with C&S Companies. C&S Companies consists of 3 specific entities. It's a large engineering firm. It has a construction branch, and it has a company called Operations, which energy, controls, automation, and a couple of software programs reside in that company. Operations is the company that I'm the president of. With me today, Steve Abramsky, who on the far right there. Steve developed the project for you. He's our lead development engineer. He basically is responsible for putting together the project, identifying the opportunities, quantifying the opportunities, working with our construction team to estimate the cost of the project. He works with SED to get the project through. He answers any questions that come up on the energy savings as well as the drawings, the engineering documentation. And then he works with, to my right here is Ben Fusco. He's in charge of the construction, the implementation of the project. What happens is as the engineering concepts come back or comments come back from SED, Ben gets engaged to make sure of the document's constructability. So the engineers may have a great layout, but there may be space constraints that Ben's able to catch, and it saves everybody a lot of time. The key piece here, though, is that Steve remains the district's key point of contact throughout the entire process. So he's developed the project for you. He'll usher it through SED. He'll answer any questions during construction. He'll actually deliver the guarantee and performance assurance report. That's really the whole gist of an energy performance contracting to you. So you have one single point of contact throughout the entire process. And we found that's something that districts really appreciate, that some of our competitors go from a salesperson to a development engineer to a construction manager and then to a whole commissioning group. We keep it with one individual throughout the entire process. And that's really one of our main competitive advantages. The second is that as you're looking at selecting an energy performance contractor, is that we're from an engineering firm. Everyone on my team is either a PE or on their way to a PE. They've all been to 4-year engineering programs. There's a lot of control companies out there that they hire what's called an energy engineer, which doesn't have the education of engineering. Truly, it's just a control technician that kind of plays that role. And that becomes a lot of issues come up when you deal with New York State code, SED requirements that they're unaware of. So we're able to kind of streamline that. In addition to the things you're considering, these projects, as I'm sure you've heard and are aware, the lighting is a big driver here. Sorry, I'm having trouble breathing. I've never given a presentation with a mask before. So the LED lighting is something that really started to happen 8 years ago in force, and we were right there on the cutting edge with that. And what happened is the LEDs have great functionality, but they coupled them with these very complicated control systems. And after implementing half a dozen of these systems, after a couple of years, we were getting calls from the districts that they needed to change the lighting system for whatever reason, and they found themselves constrained by the control system they just put in. controls become antiquated, as you know from building automation controls. They fade out. They need to be replaced. They have issues. And as educators, the worst thing you want to do is have to worry about illumination when the children are in school. And that's actually exactly what we started to come up against. We had these complex gateways that were wirelessly communicating to lights. So we kind of pivoted at that point, and we went back to solid state equipment. So our dimmers are wired, our occupancy sensors are wired. So you have the complete functionality of the LEDs, but you don't have another legacy cost or liability out there. So that's become one of our kind of our mantras walking forward. We just had a call from Owego 2 days ago, and they had a whole wing that was down because a gateway that was put in 2014 is now something that's antiquated. Now they have to worry about just to turn the lights on. That's an issue for them. So I think that's one of the advantages to having a true staff of engineers on call. They're not just looking at what's the newest thing, but what's going to actually go the distance. And I think we can confidently say that from our references that you see, we put in stuff that we do not get a lot of calls, and so it's upsetting when the lighting systems start to become an issue for us. I'll leave any questions about EPCs. I know you've heard proposals, but please feel free to interrupt us if as we go through this, if there's how the process works, the protocol of EPCs. I know it's kind of complicated and it's quite a bit different from capital projects, but it's a real advantageous vehicle for districts, and I think you'll see that when we get to the numbers. But what I'd like to do is ask Ben to just explain C&S's company and how we handle implementation, design and implementation within a group that's 500 people strong, 50 miles down the road from you. Ben.
Ben Fusco, I'm a control systems engineer with C&S. In the EPC role, I operate in a capacity of quality control, quality assurance. C&S Companies is a large consulting engineering firm, a contracting company, self-performed in-house, general contracting, electrical, mechanical, all in-house, and the operations group. So what that means for an EPC project is we have over 150 licensed architects and engineers in Syracuse that can aid us in the design and maintenance of these systems. We have in-house construction that can implement these systems. Quality is huge in a performance contract like this, so we can assure that all in-house. This allows us to really offer a unique approach to an EPC. Specifically, what that means is working with Steve through the development process. We may engage your architect to develop the project, but in-house, we're reviewing that with our engineers, our architects, to make sure that we're delivering a high quality, correctly designed system that's going to commission and then function correctly. At the same time, while we're developing these design documentation, we engage our construction staff early on in the process. And these guys are excellent. We have some of the best union tradesmen and foremen around. So they're picking up constructability issues, potential scheduling issues, long before we've mobilized and got on site. This really is a differentiator for us. It's a quality product right out of the gate. All the energy conservation measures that Steve is going to talk about, we've implemented dozens of times. We've worked out the kinks with them, and we are the sole owners of the entire process: design, implementation, construction, all for measurement and verification. And again, Steve and I are there from start to finish on that. So, once you're digging into the details now.
So my name's Steve Bramsky. I've been doing EPCs with C&S for about 9 years now. Been around the block a little bit. Anytime that we go into a facility, the very first thing that we look at is lighting. Now, I know that it's no secret to anybody that LED lighting is the way to go. So as a part of this project, we recommend doing a district-wide LED lighting retrofit. Now, unlike some other ESCOs, we only do dedicated LED light fixtures. We do not do retrofits. So the fixtures that are going in are designed to be LED, only LED, right from the get-go. So it gives you the full functionality of an LED with the longevity of an LED. Moving on from lighting, the next thing that we look at is the building envelope, the actual physical structure, your walls, your roof. Anytime a building is constructed, its airtightness is actually a function of construction quality rather than age. You see some buildings that are 50 years old that are tight, some that are 50 years old that leak like a sieve. In the same manner, you see buildings that are 5 or 10 years old that are either super tight or also leak like a sieve. So what we want to do is take your buildings and we want to control the airflow. We want to seal the roof wall connections. We want to seal up any penetrations in the foundation and seal up any of the snap clips in the windows to make sure that the air that's getting into the building is air that was intended to be in the building from your HVAC system. And what that allows us to do is that allows us to take your air handling equipment and actually control the air that's going into and out of the building so that you're ventilating the way that your design engineers intended. Moving on from the building envelope system, we'd like to look at your building controls. Most of your controls have been upgraded to electronic control. There are, however, some legacy pneumatic control devices. And what these pneumatic control devices require you to do is maintain an air compressor, which requires electricity. And it also means that you have miles and miles of pneumatic air lines deep inside of your walls that get dry rotted and crack, develop leaks, and that means that those air compressors have to run a considerable amount of time. You have a couple of pneumatic devices left, and you're running very large air compressors just to maintain that equipment. So we want to remove that equipment and install electronic control and actuation. While we're at it, in your high school, there's also about 20 vestibule cabinet heaters that are only controlled by local wall thermostats. While we're touching the control system anyways, we want to take those and integrate those into your control system so that you can monitor it, and that allows your building staff to identify problems as they occur rather than waiting for a teacher or somebody else to notice, oh, hey, this vestibule is very cold, weeks after it being a problem. From the control system, we like to look at your domestic hot water generation, particularly two systems. The first one is your normal domestic hot water generation. All of your buildings use conventional efficiency domestic hot water heaters that generate hot water and transport that hot water into storage tanks, fairly large storage tanks at that. And what that means is you have a large capacity of domestic hot water for showers, for sporting events, and things of that sort. Talking to Steve, it sounds like you guys don't utilize the domestic hot water the way it was designed, which means that you actually are maintaining a very large volume of heated water for a comparatively small demand. And that means that you're just radiating all of that heat back into your boiler room and it's a waste. So what we recommend doing is taking your existing domestic hot water infrastructure and installing instantaneous domestic hot water heaters. What that does is that provides a high volume of domestic hot water when you need it, but it doesn't require you to maintain that volume of domestic hot water and continually heat that while it's not being used. To expand on the domestic hot water, all of your dishwashers use electric booster heaters in order to take that domestic hot water from 140 degrees up to 180 degrees in order to sanitize for dishwashing. All of your booster heaters at your high school, middle school, and elementary school are all 39 kilowatts. We want to take those out and replace them with natural gas-fired domestic booster heaters. To give you a sense of just how much power 39 kilowatts is, we consistently implement LED lighting conversions to a point where an entire district's electrical load due to lighting is equal to or less than that 39 kW. And you guys have 3 of these units. It represents a very, very large electrical demand for the district. Moving on to your HVAC
Are they necessary?
Pardon?
Are they necessary?
So sanitizing hot water is necessary. We recommend using natural gas because the unit cost for energy is dramatically lower. If you don't want to use sanitizing hot water, there's also chemical treatment for the water that can be used instead. And then your expense becomes chemical treatment instead of heating that water to 180 degrees.
No, I was referring to when you said we had 3.
Yes. So each of your facilities has dishwash stations, and each dishwash station requires its own booster heater locally. They're located right next to the dishwashers.
There's one in each school.
Correct. That is correct. And that infrastructure is necessary to have right there. because you're heating the water up so much that you can't be pumping it across a campus or across a building because the heat losses are just too significant.
But we're not heating water that we're not using.
That is correct. That is correct. For these booster heaters, they are effectively a really high-powered instantaneous domestic hot water heater. So you take your 140 degree water and then heat it to 180 degrees as it's passing through. So you're not generating large quantities of 180 degree water. That is correct. From there, we look at the HVAC systems. Walking around with Steve, it sounds like your high school has a lot of areas where there are comfort issues relating to the HVAC systems. One of the locations that was identified was your library. There's a VAV system in there that isn't working properly. As part of the project, we want to rebalance that system so that you're getting proper ventilation in that space the way that it was originally intended. In addition, this auditorium was also made to be understood. We were made to understand that this was also a problem area, particularly with the air not being able to destratify. So you get hot air up high, cooler air down low, where the occupancy sensor or where the space sensors are for temperature. So you end up with a lot of heat up top, and your unit, your equipment is just recirculating that same hot air up top and not moving the air down low. So what we want to do is we want to modify the ventilation system in this auditorium in order to properly ventilate the space and move the air throughout the entire auditorium. In order that'll reduce energy usage because you're not chasing a set point that you can't hit because the sensors and the air being moved are in separate locations. And it will also increase occupant comfort and make the space more useful. Moving on. The district has a lot of air handling equipment, air handlers, and gas rooftop units. We recommend replacing gas rooftop units with DX cooling in them. These units are both fairly old, so they're approaching the end of their useful life. And DX cooling technology has advanced pretty significantly over the last several years. So we want to install newer rooftop units that have higher efficiency cooling. This will also increase the longevity of your system writ large. Your bus garage currently has gas heat, which is pretty typical for bus garage. You utilize conventional efficiency unit heaters, which basically just have a burner and a fan that blow air across a coil. Bus garages, they have overhead doors, which means there's a lot of air changes every time you open that door. So a better way to heat a bus garage is to have infrared heat, because what that does is it uses radiation to heat objects in the room. You walk in there, you feel the radiation, you don't feel the hot air. It heats the floor, it heats the buses, it heats the walls. So every time you open that door, you're not purging all of the hot air in that space. So that's what we want to do in your bus garage. The last facility that we looked at was a maintenance garage that is completely on electric heat. There are a couple of 15 kilowatt heaters in there, and during the entire heating season, the district is heating that space strictly with electricity, and it has the exact same problem as those booster heaters that I was discussing earlier. It represents a very, very high electrical load. What we want to do for the district is install propane heat. So we bring in a local propane tank and get you on propane heat, which operates from a unit cost perspective is significantly lower. And that will reduce the operating cost of that space. Combined with the building envelope sealing that we want to do in that same building, we can dramatically reduce the cost of heating in that location.
Would you consider better insulating?
Better insulated wood.
It's a tin frame.
That is correct.
Metal frame.
That is correct. So better spray insulating that building would also be a part of
That would be included
building.
in your proposal?
That is correct. That is correct. The building envelope line item includes that facility as well. That includes all three of your academic buildings, your bus garage, and that maintenance garage.
Yeah.
The project that I've just outlined would have a project value of $1.33 million. That means that the district will be on the line for about $111,400 per year. The average annual energy savings is going to be $80,296 per year, plus an additional $6,499 in estimated material savings from not having to replace bulbs and ballasts and other savings reductions from the new equipment being installed. That combined with about $99,700 in SED reimbursement, and mind you, these are averages over the 18-year course of the project. will yield an average annual net benefit of $75,107 for the district, which I think makes a pretty strong argument for the advantage of EPCs generally. Now, something that I want the district to understand is that the project that we have just outlined is an option. It's not something that we want to impose on the district. The district has certain needs, the district has certain long-term strategic plans, and we want to be a partner to the district. So if there are items that we haven't covered that are really important to the district, we would augment that project in order to accommodate those needs. Charlie and I were communicating earlier, and he had asked if the field stadium lighting was included. It is not included in the project as presented because the run hours on that equipment is typically fairly low, which makes it hard to get the runtime. But as Charlie and I discussed, if that was something that was important to the district, we would absolutely augment the project in order to accommodate that measure. Another type of equipment that is primed to be replaced would be your boilers at the elementary and the middle school. You have 5 boilers there in total that are primed to be replaced. An EPC is a good fit for that replacement. The reason that we didn't include them in our proposal with the project that we're presenting is because we didn't want to overcommit on equipment replacements and not be able to afford it. So boilers are something that has a very high or very low return on investment. So you can get yourself into a lot of trouble with overpromising. If the district came to us and said, these boilers are a very high priority for us, we would augment the project in order to accommodate those boilers, but we didn't want to be overpromising coming right out of the gate.
We find it's better too to work, you seem to be poised for a capital project, am I correct? So
Yes.
we find it really advantageous to work with your engineers at that point as the projects are being developed and decide which bucket pieces belong, where they're served the best. We can capture incentive money, which capital projects don't typically do. We can quantify various types of equipment. You know, you could buy a boiler that has 90% efficiency, 94% efficiency. We can calculate with the team what advantage that actually delivers to you. So you can decide to move some stuff over. Steve's working on a project right now out in Hammondsport where we couldn't pay for the entire boiler room, but we could buy the boilers. So the capital project upgraded the entire infrastructure for the new boilers, and we delivered, commissioned, and are guaranteeing the boiler installation. So there's all sorts of ways you can work the capital project and an EPC to leverage the strengths of both vehicles simultaneously.
And that was going to be my question, because listening to your presentation, which you did a great job, I heard some of the same scope of duties from the building project. Is that correct? What I heard? So that's where this proposal would work with our capital project to see what is going to be best for the district.
Correct.
In the long run.
Correct. It's our understanding that the domestic hot water heater is already being considered for the capital improvement project, and that is an example of a measure that we would recommend taking out of the capital project, moving to an EPC to free up space for other items in the capital project. And that's the kind of partnership that we want this to be. So it's really all about, okay, what are the district's objectives? What does the district want to prioritize? And how can we design a project in order to satisfy those objectives?
The ceiling of, you talked about the ceiling of the buildings, and not leaking, like I said, that was something that was in the capital project, right?
Yeah.
I heard. So yeah, those types of things. So
Have you done work with Ashley McGraw, who's our architect?
Yes.
You have?
Yep.
You work well with him?
Yeah, well, it's a
I have to ask.
well, they're the architects are focused on a very specific result, and usually, we give you an example. We had an auditorium like this where they wanted to put in, it was too hot on the stage, so they had a design for 10 tons of cooling for the stage because it was too hot. Our EPC proposal was to replace all the stage lighting with LEDs, and it would reduce the heat load on the stage by significantly more than 10 tons. So they're not conflicts. It's just sometimes different opinions, and sometimes professionals don't like to be second guessed. So I don't believe there's any ill will between any architectural engineering firms, but like any professional, nobody likes to be second guessed, and that does come up, but I think it results in a better product.
When you get into a difference of recommendations, does it become a district's decision on which way to go? How does the district resolve if the general contractor or the architect proposes one way and say, you come in and say, I have a better way?
Yeah.
Now, do you guys negotiate that, or is that something the district has to make a decision on?
No, it's because we're all engineers, it's an objective decision. So usually the answer is correct. The problem is that somebody didn't have all of the information for the correct answer is usually the result. So it's obvious that, oh yeah, we can just upgrade the lighting and eliminate the cooling of the stage. I didn't know we were gonna consider upgrading the lighting. So it's really, it's not a subjective area that where somebody says, what type of chiller would you prefer? Or what type of boiler would you prefer? It's this boiler will result in this operational cost, where this boiler will result in this operational cost. This one is clearly going to be, it costs a little bit more, but SED's paying 90% of your bill. Over 10 years, this one will clearly come out better. And so but they don't look at it that way. They just look at it first cost, I'm in a budget. We look at the life cycle cost of equipment. So it's not like it's not a subjective argument. It's just that it's a different way of looking at things. And we've been convinced the other way as well, when they say, look, the district really wants to do it this way. This is important to them, even though this facade might not have the R value that you'd like it to have. It's architecturally what the district wants, and that's the decision then. So thank you.
Ultimately, we're here to serve the district.
Jim had something.
Yeah. Question, how long would you envision something like this taking you, and when do you work? Just in summers, nights, how does that go?
So under typical conditions, we would, today, let's say that the district made a decision in November to move forward. There would be a 4 to 6 week audit process after that. We would bring a more refined project to the district after having conversations about what your priorities are. We would then engage with your engineer in order to do that design. That design will probably take another 2 months. So at that point, we're looking into February. From that point, we would go to SED after we did our design reviews. SED presently is about an 8-week turnaround time. Figure another week on top of that for back and forth comments and questions with SED. And then from there, once we receive approval, we would order. So the objective would be to June 30th to start construction. Our objective is always to have the construction done and be able to turn the bulk majority of the project over early September. We don't want to have to work second shift because it's harder for the district, it's harder for your cleaning staff, it's harder for your maintenance staff. Given current circumstances, we have had to go second shift with work. There's no change orders, so it didn't change the cost of the districts that we're currently working with or anything, but there is work that did bleed over into second shift, just as a product of labor shortages and material shortages.
And that being said, we would be done with the construction, but usually we need to see the heating system kick on to make sure that everything's commissioned correctly. And, so we don't leave in September 1, we stick into, well into the fall to make sure everything's functioning.
Right. One of our team members, Braden Ireland, is a certified commissioning agent who does formal building commissioning for LEED certified buildings, and he's on our team, part of Ben's quality control team, and he goes through and he does final commissioning on all of your equipment, so that we know that all of the functional tests come out correct. That does require deferred testing on equipment that's been installed, such as DX cooling or the heating system, when you're closing out the project not in season. So if you close out the project in September, you don't really have the opportunity to run the cooling equipment through its paces. So we would come back the following summer in order to run that equipment through its paces to make sure that it's actually functioning the way it's supposed to. So that is part of the responsibility of our closeout.
all set? Any other questions?
Yeah, I
Go
do.
ahead, go on, sir.
Just for the process, I know we approved the putting up the capital project at the last board meeting in December. With the energy performance bid contract that we're gonna put up for vote, is the process that we approve to, if the community approves to move forward in an energy process, then, or performance contract, then we put it out for bid, or do we put it out for bid first, and then that's what the voters know what we're voting on?
For the capital project.
No, for the I'm all set with the capital, I'm talking just about this one. The capital project, we've already approved that, and we're gonna put that in vote in December.
Right.
How do we handle, what's the process for the energy performance contract?
My understanding is we end up selecting
Contract.
the company, or right, the ESCO, who's gonna do the EPC for us. And then you guys
So,
do the contractors and that stuff. So it's different, or at least my understanding of it is different than from the capital project, how the bidding process or who comes in and does the work.
so in December, what is the community gonna vote on?
So energy performance contracts do not need voter approval.
Correct.
The board can appoint an energy service company, CNS, whoever it is, and start down the path. They'll do the energy audit. They'll come back with more detailed findings. And at some point, the board and the ESCO will decide on this is the scope of the energy performance contract that we want to enter into. That doesn't require approval from the community, as long as it meets the payback requirements of SCD. If it, leads, return is within 18 years, then you're good. You don't need to go to the public. If you want to receive your enhanced building aid ratio, which in our case, it would be the 89.1% for 21-22, then you need to have the community vote on the energy performance contract. The language that they're voting on in December is not an energy performance contract of $1.3 million. The language that they're voting on is to say that we, the public, agree to the district receiving the additional 10% enhanced building aid on the project. So, if the scope ends up being $1.5 million, what we really need the community, what the public needs to give us the approval of is getting that additional 10% building aid. If the public were to vote down the energy performance contract referendum in December, we could still go forward. It would mean our aid ratio would be 79%. Now, politically, if they voted it down, it would be a decision for the community, for the board to make. Do we go forward? But the board can enter into energy performance contracts without community approval. It's just that gives you an additional building aid ratio amount.
Thank you for that explanation. So my question is, would we entertain bids as a board and then decide what company we're gonna work with before that December vote or after that December vote?
Could be either.
It could be either.
Yep.
That's a decision we'll have to make together.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add on to that, which we run into this all the time, and that's the right way to do it with that 10%, just the 10% option, usually that's never questioned, they want to do it. But things move, because it's the same architect engineer, they just simply move on a layer in a project between an EPC and a capital project. So as long as your capital project budget maintains, say you approve a $20 million project, as long as that's maintained, the scope items can still move over to an EPC and back and forth, until you're comfortable with the way it's set up.
Sure.
So there's a lot of flexibility. The EPC really has a lot of flexibility going forward. And one thing that we should note, that our engagement with all of that, it comes at no cost. We know that this is enough of a decision for a district, and we're willing to go into the process just being told our intention is to work with you. We don't need some sort of financial cancellation figure or anything like that. We understand that that's all in the best intent. So
I'm assuming you have other districts that you have completed work on in our area that it is completed as of now, that maybe we could get information on that as far as like looking at that or references that Ron or Charlie could talk to?
Yeah, we can not only give you references, but we can also, if anybody's interested in, we've taken groups through some of the districts that we've worked with.
But to kind of look at it.
Yeah, that's a great point, because the retrofitting of a light versus a new light, you can see the difference when you walk into the classroom.
And having someone to talk to as well that is the superintendent of that school or whatever, to see how things, just to bounce maybe questions off if Ron wanted to or something like that, to kind of see how things went and
Yes.
the process and such would be probably helpful as well.
Yep. We included some in here, but we have many more, whatever you need. We're wrapping up a $22 million project at Griffiths Air Force Base right now, with turning it into kind of a drone hotspot for companies are coming in from all over now that the buildings are.
So you do work on any type of business, just school districts, you don't have like a specialty that you work with certain.
No,
Yeah.
it's energy it's really just that vehicle energy performance contract works for any public entity in New York State.
CNS does have a dedicated K-12 team that has been working with K-12 clients for about 20 years now. So we do have a very deep bench of people who are very familiar with SED.
If you're in here after June 30th, probably our general contracts aren't even going to be in place at that time, will they be? So is there going to be any interference? Are they going to damage or hinder any of the work that you've done because you were here previous to them?
No, we're very savvy at coordinating schedules with the capital project. So we have a large group of staff in our construction team that acts as an agency CM and the K-12 market. I believe there's 60 of them. So we understand the pain points. We understand how to work with everyone else in the capital project. And a lot of the work we do is an EPC going on simultaneously or slightly before or slightly after a capital project, and making that a seamless delivery regardless of schedule.
Thank you.
We've had some where we come back to install lights on a wing that there was no sense in us putting the lights in, waiting for the renovations to take place, and then putting them back in. So we've actually waited as long as 2 years just to finish that part of the project. We'll close out the project, we'll put assurances in place, and just say, as soon as that space is ready, we'll be back to do the lights. So it gives you a lot of flexibility.
Any other questions?
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Thank you.
John. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next we'll move on for public to be heard. We received 3 requests to speak tonight at the Board of Education meeting. Our first is from Jeffrey Leonard. If you want to just stand up, Mr. Leonard, or you can come down here. Huh.
Logan Howe will be speaking.
Oh, Logan, I apologize. Hi, Logan. I had Jeff, Mr. Leonard. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, so today we are going to be proposing the idea of indoor track here at Sauquoit Valley. And firstly, I'd like to thank you guys for meeting with me to suggest this proposal. I'd like to thank Mr. Jones, Mr. Wheelock, and the whole board for being here. Thank you. So in 2019, we tried to start this indoor track program, but we had to put this idea on hold due to COVID restrictions and all the other things that came with that crazy year. And we believe that with our student body that was interested in this and the parental signatures received from those, which I believe there's a letter passed out, this would be a good experience for the school itself. And Sauquoit has had a long tradition of success in athletics, and we would like to expand our offerings into the winter season. And this sport would provide an opportunity for those students who might not usually participate in a winter sport, and it has the added benefit of offering these athletes a way to stay in shape for their spring sport. And also, this sport is a full 100% participation sport and would have no bench, or everybody participating would be doing something in the sport. The idea of indoor track and field is not new. We've had the idea passed in the 80s by Coach Pat Cahill. And this idea, I'm not sure actually where it went. which is interesting, but I think we can maybe bring it back. And I think for myself, and I think I can speak for my teammates, we would love to have this opportunity. We are passionate about running, and we are eager to involve other students, whether they are first-time runners or on one of the current teams, and there is an event for everyone. Recognize that there is a cost associated with starting this program. We are hopeful that the board will be able to find room in the budget to allow us to move forward with the winter season. We are ready to run with this if you are. Thank you again for your time. Does anyone have any questions?
How many participants? I know you got parent signatures here too.
Yes, we have 14 parent signatures, but I believe there were 20 kids signed up. There was only a one-day window that I had to get the signatures, so that's the issue behind that.
My name is Johnny Katera, and just to kind of go off, excuse me, what Logan was talking about. If you haven't been to an indoor track and field meet at Utica College, it's, Mr. Nelson, I'm sure you've been there. It's quite the spectacle to see. You got schools from Syracuse, Frontier League, Center State Conference, and TVL all competing against each other. The kids have opportunities to see like state records being broken. Kids going to Division I strong elite competitors, all the way down to just a regular participant, Joe Schmo, who's just there to be on a team and be a part of something. It's a all-inclusive Friday night. That's all that it is on Friday. There's no Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Saturday. It's only Friday night. It's the same thing every week. They do a great job of organizing it. They change the events every week. So one week you might have a bunch of relays, more team-oriented. Next week you'll have events. So it's not the same thing every week. They try to change it up. And in my opinion, it's the greatest thing that's happening in our sports in the area, outside. The only thing that would compete with it is Seaside Sport Complex down in Long Island. I would say it's the only thing that is better than it. Of the 20 Center State Conference schools, which is the conference that our athletic program competes in, 14 schools participate in indoor track and field. Adirondack, Clinton, Canastota, Sherburne-Irville, Little Falls, Dodgeville, Herkimer, Waterville, Westmoreland, New York Mills, Remsen, Oriskany, Poland, and West Canada Valley. So you have schools that are our size that compete, larger than us, and significantly smaller than us that are all competing there. We had 20 students to sign up. We had 14 parent signatures for our letter of interest to Mr. Jones. But since then, we've also had more kids that kind of been, oh, what's that? That seem more interested. We understand that the timing is not that great, but we wanted to do this the right way. And Logan and I started this back in 2019 when I met with Mr. Wheelock. The pandemic took a lot away from our kids, and I just hope that we can decide to maybe give one thing back to them at this time. Mr. Deaver?
Do they have opportunity to go on to indoor state meet and so forth, sectionals, or is that a separate?
Yep. I'm not sure what they scheduled it this year. Everything is supposed to be at Utica College as far as like a regular season. I believe OCC is hosting the sectional meet, and then I believe Ocean Breeze is hosting like the state meet. But as far as like all the conference championships, all those happen at Utica College. So like transportation is dropping kids off at UC every week at the same time. So the CSC championships are there, TVL, Frontier League, because they don't have anywhere else to go. The Syracuse schools stay at OCC, and then I think OCC got the bid for sectionals, but I could be wrong because in my time at New York Mills, when we had a program there, our sectional championships were at OCC one year, and the following year there at Utica College, and then the pandemic came. So.
This is a discussion item further on the agenda.
Yeah.
That's what I was just gonna say. I want to be fair to other people that have spoken during public session to make sure that we're not having this. I do have questions, but I want to make sure we're following our procedures that we establish and not get into the dialogue.
I agree. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Todd. Okay, next we'll move on to Robbie Sullivan.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
You guys all know my standpoint on pretty much everything. I've been pretty clear and transparent with how I feel on things. So I wanted to come and publicly apologize for my emotions taking over at the last board meeting that I personally attended. I know that, as you just stated, during these sessions and this speaking, there is no back and forth. So I do have a couple points that I just wanted to bring up, some questions. Obviously, there's a clear divide between the board members and some members of the public. And there has to be a solution somewhere for us to be on the same page. So I've been looking up the duties of the board members because I do intend to run for school board next year. And in doing so, I've found out that basically when it comes to the mandates for masks and the COVID protocols and everything that us parents are mainly against, I understand that your hands are tied, that you have to follow these mandates as they come down from the government and from the governor and from New York State. But I feel as a parent of small children who are attending these schools, it would speak volumes to have some sort of even verbal support from the board saying, we understand your viewpoint. We sympathize with you. We understand, and we're taking into account all of the science and medical studies that have been presented to you guys over and over and over again. Even to have you sign off on one of our petitions that are being brought up to the government levels would speak volumes to us. So that might be a potential step in the right direction to get the board and the public on the same page. Just hearing from you guys that we are not the enemy would definitely help. So obviously there's a divide, and I believe that also transparency and accountability are two main things that the public expect from the board members, and that we're not really having a lot of faith that that's happening. So for instance, the method of scheduling the board meetings and only putting them in the school website calendar or only posting the board agendas on the website, parents aren't checking the website every single day. But you know what we do check every day is our phones, because we have Parent Square and we get alerts every day. So sending out a Parent Square alert to say, hey, there's a board meeting today at 7 o'clock or next week at 7 o'clock would definitely help us to be able to attend these meetings and follow what's going on with you guys and be able to know what's going on with the budget and this capital meeting, a capital project and stuff of that sort, because we do want to follow it. We do want to know that our tax money is going where it needs to go. So, that's a problem with a suggested solution. And that's what I'm trying to do at this point, is that we have all these problems, and I don't want to be that person that's pointing out this, and this are all wrong. I want to say this is wrong. How can we fix it? This is a suggestion. So that being said, I do believe that the Parent Square should be used for the Board of Education meeting scheduling. Also, on the Parent Square agenda, whatever, we received alerts twice this past week about PTO fundraising. One was a call to action to get parents and the public to donate to the PTO to cover all these programs that we no longer have funding for because we're not doing these programs. This makes zero sense to us as parents, for the public. Why is the school asking for money from us to do these programs that aren't even being offered to the children anymore? We're not doing field trips. We're not doing school dances. We're not doing the egg drop and stuff. Everything that was listed in there, we're no longer doing because of protocol, because of the COVID protocol regulations. We're not doing assemblies. We're not having those types of community involvement within the school. So asking for money, to me personally, and others that I've spoken to, was a huge slap in the face for you guys to ask for money for things we're not even providing for the children anymore. On top of that, why are certain things allowed and other things are not when they are essentially the same thing? So for example, the Which Way is the 5K was allowed on school property and throughout the community with high level of participation. However, Trick or Treat Street is now being considered a drive-through where parents have to pay $10 per vehicle and it's scheduled per age group to drive through these stations to trick or treat. How would it be more difficult to set up those stands in the football field, on the football field, around the track, socially distanced, whatever? Because I'm not spending $60 on a costume for my kid to sit in a car and drive through and pay $10 for them to get little treats from their teachers. Trick or Treat Street was a huge thing that Sauquoit Valley has done year after year after year, and my kids look forward to it every year. So I want to know why it's being canceled for Sauquoit and changed to this different thing, but other schools are still continuing to do trunk or treat. They're still continuing to do their craft fair fundraisers. Mount Markham just put out on their Parent Square app today that their craft fair is scheduled for November 1st. And though it is in Herkimer County, so it might be a different rule, I can't fathom why Sauquoit is doing things differently than the other school districts when it comes to these safety and protocol regulations, especially when it comes to big fundraisers like that. I was going to touch on air filtration, but obviously that's part of what the capital project is about, so I'm not even going to touch that. I'm happy that you guys are working with the energy efficiency, stuff like that. I did hope that the air filtration would be a little bit more than lighting, but I'm happy that some movement is working on that. And lastly, as I said, just having support from the school board in that, saying that you understand or you are on our side or that you at least sympathize with some of our standpoints. We all know that the vaccine mandate is coming down. There are school districts within New York that have already been coordinating with their county health departments to have vaccine clinics within schools in order to vaccinate children age 5 to 11 as soon as the FDA approval comes through. My request to you is that you listen to the parents when we say that line has been drawn in the sand, and if vaccine mandates come down, you will see a significant decline in students who are enrolled at Sauquoit Valley Central School District, and they will become homeschooled. I can't stress this enough. Having even one person from the board say, we're with you, we don't agree with this, we'll sign your petition, we'll stand behind you, would speak volumes to the community as a whole who are against these mandates and who are advocating for choice. So that being said, that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. All right, and our last speaker or requested speaker this evening is Mr. Fitzgerald.
Good evening.
How are
Thank you for allowing me to speak. A month ago, I came here and I asked if you could look into the possibility of renting out the buses and transporting the children so that the school district would be totally out of the bus business. I cited several factors of where you could have significant savings. In addition, you could rent out the bus garage. So I'd like to know if you could make any contact with a private bus company.
I believe we'll be discussing this later on. Yes. We'll actually have a report for you. The Transportation Subcommittee did meet prior to this, so we'll provide an update in a little, and actually coming up in the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
So they can't answer you right now, but they have your answer and let me know.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Okay. Next, we'll move on to Board of Education Subcommittee reports.
Okay, as Don just said, we did have a facilities and transportation subcommittee, but the focus was on transportation. You know, Mr. Fitzgerald did come in here 2 meetings ago and asked the same question. If the district considered renting our buses, and I think specifically we considered maybe looking into a contracted transportation service as opposed to running it our own in-house. And briefly, and I can certainly have other members of the committee that sat in there. That was Mr. Nicotera, Mrs. Miller, and Mr. Nelson. And we also invited our transportation supervisor, Mr. Crossman, to attend that meeting. And just basically some of the takeaways, we certainly understand or the climate right now for transportation is in a difficult spot. There's not a school district that I know of around here, probably in New York State, maybe beyond our state, whether they're in their own transportation business or in contracted transportation business, they're struggling to find drivers and fulfill their commitments. And we are no different. We're doing okay right now with our drivers, with a combination of full-time and part-time substitute drivers. And we're getting the job done on a daily basis, but you do need to know that sometimes on a daily basis or the evening before, you may leave work with the puzzle put all together for the next day's transportation needs. And one phone call could change that. And our ability to manage putting that puzzle back together and provide the transportation service to our community gets managed in-house and gets done and dealt with to the manner that we can best fill, that need. So basically, and other members can feel free to chime in here, but currently we are pleased, given that situation, we're pleased with the current transportation setup that we have for one of those needs that I just said, our ability to be able to take a transportation issue and make adjustments on the fly and not have to rely on a contracted service to do that, especially when we know locally some of the contracted services are having some of the same difficulties we are in fulfilling our commitments for bus routes and having qualified drivers on. So despite the driver shortage, we're doing okay at this time. We're getting by fairly well. But again, that only goes for as long as we can continue to have drivers behind the wheel. And I'll say we take pride and are very pleased with the transportation staff that we do have. Our drivers provide a safe and confident transportation for our students on a daily basis. And that's not an easy job to do. So we commend them for their efforts. And I think we recognize that as our community, our drivers, to the extent possible, try to connect with their families, with the kids and that. And sometimes that can get lost in a transportation service. So in a sense, we feel we're in a great place. We're very, very pleased with our transportation, our staff, our bus drivers, and the service that they're providing. We do not feel at this time that a contracted service would be necessary. We do understand that there may be factors that might make us kind of force us down those lines to consider that. But at this time, we don't feel those factors are in place. And that meaning that, hey, we just don't have drivers. We've lost our mechanics and we can't fill certain positions. Then I think we do certainly want to look beyond there. But I'll defer to the other members of the group here and see if they have anything more they want to add.
I couldn't, as a Board of Education member, I couldn't fathom the idea of contracting out our buses to some of the services that are serving the city of Utica and Rome and some of the other places, just knowing of the problems that those parents and students have gone through. At this time, to expose our students and our families to that type of transportation, I just would never accept that at this point right now. I've been here, I've resided in this community over 30 years. I belong to almost every organization that existed in the Sauquoit Valley. And I mentioned to Mr. Wheelock and my colleagues, I've never had one person tell me on my 30 years, why don't we have contract busing to transport our students? Our bus drivers are part of the education of our families. and our students. And I think the parents of Sauquoit Valley deserve that, and they should continue to have that.
I think that we're very fortunate to have the bus driving staff that we have and the transportation department that we have. We have excellent leadership in that department. I think the bus drivers care about our kids. They care about our families. And I think that goes a long way. I think we're very fortunate that the leader of our transportation department has had experience in working with contractor busing companies in the past. And I think I value his opinion, who said that he couldn't think of a benefit that we would have as a district going through a contracting company. And I value his opinion. Like I said, I think he has experience in that area. And he spoke so highly of the staff that he works with and the benefit that our kids and our families are getting, that I agree with Mr. Nicotera that I would not entertain moving toward a contracting busing either.
So to echo what both of my colleagues said, I agree. After the discussion that we had, we didn't see a financial gain, a personal gain, going out to a contracted bus service. And, you know, my son is a senior this year, and I told him at the meeting today that, you know, he had the same bus driver for 5 years, and just having that familiar face every day with you get on the bus makes such a huge difference. I think it gives that community feel that I think definitely it's not something you would get from a contracted bus service. So at this point in time, that would not be something that I would be in favor for.
Jim?
One thing I think that a number of parents appreciate is the fact that the drivers who are driving our kids are people that we have directly screened ourselves, and it's not somebody who's going to be different on different days. It's not somebody who's been picked by someone else. It's not somebody who's part of a bigger organization. So there is that benefit of accountability, you know, for who's driving our own children.
Any other thoughts from other board members on at least what we've shared at the committee level?
I know for a fact there's 2 people who drive buses who live in this community and have children or grandchildren on those buses. I couldn't imagine, it's a disaster of Utica and Rome and in other places. Utica wants the military to come in and ride buses. I mean, that's a whole other problem. I'm with the board.
Can I ask you a question? Or is it? It's pertaining to this. I just I see the signs now hiring bus drivers.
Yeah.
Do you guys consider doing any other advertising? Radio, TV?
I know on the TV there was, not specifically for Sauquoit, but I do know there was some certainly news coverage on that. We, and just in any hiring, typically going through the paper, it's been, you know, you spend a fair amount of money and don't get a lot of return. We do have an online system that we use. And I'll share that certainly with the board too. It's called OLAS, but it's an online system of service we get through our BOCES, where we'll post, probably posting more things on there than we used to just to see what we can get. Because I know in the past we may not have used it for even coaching positions, and we were posting some coaching stuff on that, instructional and non-instructional staff. So we have utilized those kind of things, which has certainly outreach beyond this area, but it's difficult. Well, right, and those who are working and maybe in employment, you're probably seeing that where you're working. I mean, the shortage is just it's all around. But.
Okay. Any other Board of Education subcommittee reports?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. We'll move on to Superintendent's report.
Okay, I just have the indoor track. I know that was an item I put under my report that I had Mr. Jones had come to me a couple weeks ago and shared that there was some interest in running an indoor track program. And I know this has been, as was shared, it was something that was discussed prior to the pandemic coming about. So what I basically instructed Mr. Jones to do was put a sign-up sheet and see if there's interest, because I think at least if we're going to bring it to the board level to have some discussion, we at least want to know there's some actual student interest behind, running this program. As Mr. Hout had shared earlier, there's upwards of 20 students that have signed up for indoor track. And we believe have signed up to make a commitment to run indoor track. Sometimes people might sign up and then don't, but to get 20 names on a list, I don't think you're going to get 15 of them just put their name on a list and then not commit to it. So that's what we have at this point. So I kind of open the any questions or discussion, thoughts that the board wants to share as far as how do we want to look at the potential of an indoor track program.
First, I want to commend Logan on doing a great job in presenting. Thank you very much for coming to the board. We love to see students come and get your feedback. I'm very excited for this program. I'm glad to see that you have that much participation already. And as far as my perspective goes, I would like to see this come to tuition. So hopefully this is something that we can get off the ground and running for you. But thank you very much for coming tonight.
The history of the program with Mr. Wheelock is our athletic director. I know Mr. Deaver was involved. Many of us would drive our children to Manley Fieldhouse back in the 90s and early 2000s. And in the winter, we drive to Manley Fieldhouse and carpool, so the boys and girls had a chance to participate. With the construction of the dome at Utica College, it's become a nucleus, as Coach explained, 14 schools with many students participating in all levels. We have that facility in our own backyard, and we're not driving to Manley Fieldhouse and driving back at 11:30 at night. I know they're going to get back late because some of the events go late, but we have an opportunity to drive 10 miles down the road versus on the thruway for over an hour's time. So, and we had a parent several weeks ago that talked about concern for participation in different activities. And we take those comments into consideration. And here's an opportunity for students to participate. And the thing that I like about it, and we go to many of the meets there, as it was mentioned, it is a competitive event, but it's a participation event. Sometimes they have 4 or 5 different heats of participants, which means you're the 4th or 5th best in the mile. You may not be the best running against top caliber, but even if you're the 5th best, there's a time for you, a place for you, and an audience for you to participate in front of. And I think that's a motivating factor, and it gives kids a chance to raise their self-esteem, especially after what we've been through. God, I'm sorry.
Ron.
I was just gonna ask, the cost of it. Do we know what the cost of it is? I can't imagine it's anything.
Yeah, it would be a rough estimate at this time. I guess because we don't have it currently in our coaching stipend schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So typically what we would do is look at what's required of a coach for this particular position. And, where in our stipend chart might that position match up with as far as trying to come up with, length of season, commitment, practice, meets, those kind of things. So I don't have a definitive number. I could say probably anywhere from, $3,000 to $5,000 as a guess, but somewhere in that range. And I know it's a large range, but without kind of knowing all those details, that would be a ballpark. That's certainly whatever the cost of transportation would be. As Mr. Nicotera said, it's certainly much closer, traveling down the road to Utica College as opposed to, someplace in Syracuse, which I would argue probably has allowed indoor track to expand to where it is now, especially in this region. And the number of schools that was mentioned by Coach Nicotera that are involved, both large and small, because of the accessibility to Utica College, I think has changed the dynamics of how people look at indoor track and the accessibility to it and the interest to do it. Because some kids might not be interested in driving out once a week or twice a week, whatever it was in the past, to Syracuse. That might just kind of deter them from competing in a sport that otherwise they may, if it wasn't that kind of travel commitment. But yeah, so as far as, I really can't factor in, the cost. There's, I'd have to kind of know exactly how many meets there would be and what the cost of, the transportation would be to take it out there. But I wouldn't guess that wouldn't be more than, a couple $1,000s at the most.
I mean, for that amount of money, I think the amount of interest that we have in it, I don't see why we wouldn't go forward with it.
Mr. Deaver?
I think if we compare this to the other sports that we have, I don't think there's a more economical situation in the sense that transportation, now that it's not going to Syracuse, it's here. Transportation is probably going to be less than any other sport. We have the uniforms and the equipment, they don't need a helmet. We don't have to hire referees. It's really a very economical activity in terms of, I think it's a great opportunity for kids. I kind of like the idea too that the environment there is such that, they'll run kids. If a student's kind of slow, they put them in a group where there's other people that are there, and at this, you get in your same zone kind of, and it's a lot of people encouraging each other. It's a good atmosphere for participation.
I think my kids something.
Mr. Sackhoff?
Just wanted to make a comment. Logan, well done. I've responded to a parent from the last meeting, and I know people continue to reach out to me about what to do if you want to form a club. So I just want to reiterate, especially anyone online, really, it's simple. There's a lot of enthusiastic people here that want things for the students. If you get in touch with a principal or a teacher with an idea, it's pretty simple if you'd like to do that. With some interest, I've talked to 2 principals about it. If there's interest, we'd love to hear about it here and have that conversation. It's pretty clear that this could happen. I hope it does. But we're ready to hear people come with ideas for things for students. I'm waiting for someone to recommend a ski club at the high school. Wink, wink. Sorry, but I'm not. It's that simple. I want to put it out there that we are very open to having kids have activity and to do things. People are, they're ready to help. I don't know if there's something out there that people that were not ready to do that, we are. So I just appreciate everybody's feedback and me carrying on about it. This is the 3rd meeting where I brought this up. So we're ready to listen. Thank you for the time.
First of all, I would like to say that I've always been an advocate of extracurricular activities. I appreciate the students bringing this forward. I agree with everybody's comments about the positivity of this program, but I don't think it's all sunshine and rainbows, and I think I do have some concerns. I'm not saying that my concerns are going to outweigh the positive things that are in the program, but I think the board should be aware of it. Number one, I have a concern of where we're going to practice. We talk about the meets and being at Utica College, and it's a great atmosphere, but that's typically once a week, and we have to practice, go in and get ready for there. So where are we going to practice? That's a question I have. I mean, if we're practicing inside the school and running in the hallways, that's what many schools do. I understand that. If we're going to go outside and run outside, I do have a concern about that. I know our cross-country team runs outside and runs on our streets and our roads that we have, but running in the winter, I think, is a higher risk than running in the fall with the weather that we have. So I do have a concern about that. When you're talking about indoor track, I assume we're going to have field events that people are going to want to do, whether it's the hammer throw or the shot put, whatever it may be, the long jump, high jump, whatever the case may be. So do we have facilities enough to accommodate those students to be properly prepared for their meets as well? And the last concern I have is I agree with Mike, and if there's other activities that we can offer, I do have a concern about overuse of injuries. I think we have a great cross-country program. We have a great track program. I think this obviously will benefit that. But when do our kids get the break that is recommended for them to have when they're running in the fall, running in the winter, running in the spring? I think our kids, I'm assuming that a majority of the kids that are interested in running indoor track are also cross-country runners, and they're also track and field athletes in the spring. And I think a responsibility of our district too is to offer other opportunities for students to get experience. Those are just two concerns I have. Like I said, I'm not trying to poo-poo the whole thing, but I don't think it's all the benefits. I think there are some concerns that the board should be aware of, and I think those are questions that I would like to see answers to about practice, those and the facilities that we may be using during the winter time when we have volleyball going on, basketball going on, other activities. And what is the answer to how many of our students are going to be runners in the fall, runners in the winter, and runners in the spring?
So this is more than just indoor track. Is that what I'm understanding, that there's other events that take place besides, like you said?
Yes,
there's
it's track and field events.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay,
They
got it.
pole vault, they
They
high
pole-
jump,
okay,
they
got
long
it.
jump,
Okay.
they throw.
They throw, okay.
I'm not against it. I don't want to say that
No,
I'm against the
and,
idea, but I
And
just
I
think
know-
it's something that we need to consider.
Nope, and I fully understand certainly where you're coming from, Mr. Nelson. And that comes down, I think, a lot to philosophy. And there's different schools of thought out there as far as continuing training or taking a break or cross training, playing something totally different, putting your body through something totally different. Even if, something like track and field is your passion, play, whether it's bowling or volleyball or basketball that you choose to do as a winter, or maybe something outside of school that you take up that's using your body in a different way. But I know there's a lot of coaching schools of thoughts out there on that, on both sides of that issue. As far as a practice facility, I would say yes, it would be our indoor, would be on campus. We're very fortunate to have 3 regulation size, basically gymnasiums here in the district. Not a lot of schools have that. And it would certainly be a scheduling, work with the athletic director to make that happen. Using our hallways, which, yes, we can do that, but we also have to be mindful of cleaning that's going on and making sure that's all coordinated with staff here. And as far as running outside, I think that's would be relegated to probably staying on campus, and that's only if weather, you get a, end of November, you're still getting 45, 50-degree day. The track is bare, maybe some of our, the access roads and things like that are but that's, certainly got to be something coordinated, and our coaches have to be mindful of that and making good decisions and working with the athletic director on that. But definitely snow on the roads and running like we do across country should not be occurring during an indoor season.
So is this something that at the next board meeting we would possibly take action on?
We could, if the board is saying, Mr. Wheelock, we want you to move forward with this, work with the athletic department to, get the logistics in place, get a coach in place, and bring somebody to be, approved at the next meeting. If the wish is to, let's go forward, athletic participation, pending, with like we do with any of our sports. We may approve a sport, but if the participation is not there, then we don't run that sport. It appears that the participation interest is here. So I just need direction from the board if that's something you want us to entertain.
I think the board is definitely would like to entertain it. I would just ask that, we have a few more details, like Ron asked about the budget, if we could get a little bit clearer clarification on that. I think you've answered the facility issue, as long as we're all on the same expectations about what's going to happen with the facilities and practices and things like that. And
the only thing I would say too is what's when does the season start?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
timing of it? Do
Right.
we have enough time to wait to the next meeting or the season's already started?
When's our next meeting?
I believe we do,
Yeah.
but I can look into that if that's something different.
November 7th.
Thank you.
November 7th.
The winter season doesn't start until November the 15th.
The 17th or
The 15th.
Oh, the 15th.
The winter season starts November 15th. Yeah, that's when it starts.
The only thing I want to add to that, Todd, is I think, I'm going to be honest, I think if we stall on this, all we're doing is forcing kids to go to Accelerate, play indoor soccer for the third season as they do all year long. There's other activities. They play baseball at Accelerate, they can play soccer at Accelerate. If we close this door right now, I mean, I think we're forcing the hand of a child to make a decision to say, well, they're not ready to do indoor track, so you know what? Yeah, I'm going to pay my fee. I'm going to play indoor soccer, and I'm going to Accelerate. Or they're going to do baseball at Accelerate, or they're going to do baseball somewhere else. Is the Dome in the Valley still open?
No.
That's closed.
Yeah.
On Herkimer Road.
Yeah.
So Accelerate. I think if it's that group of students and they have a chance to do something else, we're forcing them to say, go somewhere else, play another sport, because we're not sure what we want to do with indoor track. I think that's unfair.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not saying I'm against the idea. I just said there were some concerns. So if one of the questions I asked is how many of the individuals that are participating are soccer athletes that you talk about or baseball athletes. And that's what I mean. It's just a question I asked because I do believe, and my philosophy is that you need to take a break and you should not be training all year long. I don't think soccer players should be training all year long. I don't think baseball players should be training all year. But that's my opinion. And I just share that concern. As I stated, I'm not against the idea. I'm for extracurricular activities. I like what Mike said about the ski club and getting kids activity that way, being outdoors and getting fresh air and still having fun with their friends. And I'm not against this idea. I just had those concerns.
Well, if we offer it though, it doesn't mean that a student who maybe ran in cross country and track has to participate in that. I think that's up
right.
to the discretion of the athlete and of the parent or the student. And like Ron said on the other side, my son does train all year long for baseball. So we gauge that and you know, we do cut back. And I think we said this was one night a week after that. So, you know, during baseball season, it's 7 days a week. And then during the off season, we're still conditioning slightly. We're not moving away from it, but we're not participating at the same rate that we were during the regular season. So.
I kind of missed when the start date was for the program. Our next meeting I know is the 16th.
16th.
When is the start date for?
When was the start date?
The start date for winter season is November the 15th.
15th is second Monday, right?
Yeah.
November
15th.
is the start date.
Yep.
We could call a special board.
I think if we acted on it on the 16th, if that's what the wish, and it got approved on the 15th or 16th, they could hit the ground running.
I think section 3 can answer the question that is, our board approves it on our next board meeting, which is the 16th. Is that enough time to still get our team into the indoor track season?
Right, we'll look into that as well.
I mean, I don't know if they have a deadline.
I mean, Mr. Wheelock, if we said yes, this is to do research to see if it's viable or it's a green light. I just wanted to clarify that. We were talking to the athletic director about whether this is doable, correct?
Yeah, I think if you guys are giving me the blessing to say move forward with this, then I will get these questions answered for you. So at least you have that in mind, obviously, before any action's taken on the 16th. But essentially, anytime, you know, we entertain taking on something, and as you stated, you know, go to start at the, you know, at the bottom, I guess, or not necessarily the bottom, but you know, follow kind of the chain of command with your request. And I will say, I know Logan Houck did go and talk with our athletic director, and shared that and did some of this, but still wanted to speak, and I think this was a great
Absolutely.
opportunity for them to do so. But also along the lines of, hey, we want to hear activities. Yes, we want to hear that interest. We also want to understand that we can't do everything. And there's no guarantee that just coming to the board is going to have that. But absolutely, our job is to try to provide as many offerings as we can to meet the interests, the needs of our students, and to do it within a means that we can certainly, cover. But so along those lines, if the board, I believe you've given me your blessing to say, let's move forward with this. I will work on the logistics of how this works with Section 3, getting us in, and answer some of those other questions that you had. Thank you.
Mr. Willett, if I could just chime in quick. Sorry. I know there's a meeting that you should either inform, like Mr. Jones or me himself, but there's a meeting, Tuesday the 6th.
Okay, we can iron that out with him.
But for schools with intentions of having indoor, so I'm assuming that's more of a
Understood.
conference thing.
Yep.
So that would probably be something.
We'll work that out. Yep. Thank you. Okay, that's all I have.
That's all you have?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next, we'll move on to new business. I'll read 8.1 to 8.17 as a consent agenda. If anyone has any questions or would like anything pulled for further discussion, please let me know. 8.1, appointment of substitute teacher. 8.2, appointment of substitute teacher. 8.3, appointment of substitute teacher. 8.4, appointment of substitute teacher. 8.5, appointment of substitute teacher. 8.6, appointment of laborer. 8.7, appointment of substitute bus driver. 8.8, approval of retirement. 8.9, approval of election coordinator and inspector. 8.10, appointment of election officials. 8.11, approval of agreement for special detail law enforcement services. 8.12, approval of agreement with Utica College. 8.13, additional athletic appointments 2021-22. 8.14, approval of the audit report for 2020-2021. 8.15, treasurer's reports of balances, September 30th, 2021. 8.16, approval of minutes of the October 12th, 2021 meeting. 8.17, Committee on Special Education and Preschool Special Education recommendations. Does anyone have any questions or would like anything pulled for further discussion?
I have a question.
Okay.
8.13,
Do you want to pull, Todd, or is it just a quick question?
just a quick question. I know last year when we were obviously going through our pandemic, we did discuss, I believe, our bowling program. So do we have an idea of where the number of students that are interested in bowling?
I know
at this time?
signups are up, and that's certainly
So we haven't got the
look
final,
at,
yeah.
because that might be a leverage point in
The
indoor track.
What we just
yes.
talked about, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's it.
How about 8.8,
I was just would like that pulled, Tony?
please?
Okay. Then I will need a motion to approve 8.1 to 8.17 with the exclusion of 8.8.
So moved.
Tony, I'll need a second, please.
Second.
Is that Mike?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I will then need a motion to open discussion on 8.8.
So moved.
I need a second, please.
So moved.
Okay.
Is that time?
Todd, yep, Tony and Todd.
I'll refer to Mr. Wheelock in just a moment, but I'd like to take a moment just to thank Mrs. Mayer for her years of service and for being such a dedicated individual at Sauquoit Valley.
Thank you.
I concur with what Mr. Nicotera says. I've been blessed to certainly work with and know Mrs. Mayer for since I've been in the district, but specifically when I started as an assistant principal in the elementary school in the early 2000s. And, you know, I look at her and I can use some of those words that we always say with great teachers: extremely dedicated, compassionate, and an extremely talented teacher. Has a kind heart and really has the needs of the students in the forefront of her mind. And you know, as a teacher I know comes to work every single day wanting to make a difference with students, and I would argue that she does make a difference. She'll be missed, and I wish her certainly all the best in retirement. And congratulations on a career well served and still serving. She's not done until the end of February. But a career well served here at Sauquoit Valley, and we've been the beneficiary of that career.
And then we're always looking for good substitutes.
Yes.
So, yeah. Any further discussion before we vote on 8.8? Okay. All those in favor to approve 8.8? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion approved. All right. Next, we'll move on to miscellaneous topics.
I'd say, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike. No, go ahead.
Mr. Willock, I know that we had a concerned grandmother who would come in and you were going to follow up with, there was some conversation about what's going on with city BOCES and that young gentleman that had cancer, the 7th grader.
Yes.
And do we have any update on that, or do we know kind of what's going on with that situation?
Well, I can't necessarily share the specifics of a student, but I can share, we have followed up with her, at a meeting with her, and continue to work on making sure we're providing the best education we can for this young man as he gets through his health needs.
You know, just to add to that discussion, Ron, there's quite a few that kind of fall into the category of homeschool educational programs where they actually can get the whole thing on. And then when I was looking into it, there were some school districts that actually use that in conjunction with a tutor. So there's both a program and an at-home tutor for students. Just throw that in the throw that out there as another.
Okay.
You know.
Thank you.
I have a question. Did Ron
I'm sorry, Ron, did you have a question?
Did you?
Oh, okay.
You're
I try to lean back and forth
No,
so
I
I
know,
can see
sorry.
everyone.
Ron, I know you've talked in the past about Parent Square and advertising about our board meetings and things, and your concern is legitimate, is that only our parents of our students have that access to that.
Right.
Does that preclude us from using that though? I mean, like if we wanted to advertise in the newspaper, if I didn't get access to the newspaper, I wouldn't get that information from there. I'm just saying, I don't know if we can use what we're doing now, access on the website, but then also using Parent Square. And even though just our parents are getting it, it's just another way of getting that information out.
Right. No, I mean, and I think if there's certain things like, especially when you're talking about a budget vote.
Right, yeah.
Saying use it for that.
Yeah.
It's like, you kind of balance that,
Yeah.
you know, are you crossing the line as far as giving one part of the population an advantage that another one doesn't get? So, you know, advertising of a board meeting is, you know, we advertise that already, you know, and
In
people
Parent
have
Square?
access to it, but if not in Parent
Oh,
Square.
okay.
No, it goes out in the newspaper, and it goes out in, on the website. But, you know.
And I know it's on the school calendar that goes home
It's on
as
the
well.
school
That
calendar.
goes home with
I mean,
every
if
child.
You guys,
Yeah.
I will, if you have particular feelings about advertising it in a different platform, be it Parent Square, you tell me.
I just don't know if is there any negative aspect of doing it that way?
I don't think, I mean, obviously, anytime you're informing people
Right.
of something. It's,
I agree with you on the budget thing, because then I think it would look like we're influencing certain
Right.
population.
Yep.
So I agree with that wholeheartedly, but providing information, if that's what we have Parent Square for, then I think that's something we should be using it for.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Is there any kind of, I don't know what it's been used for in the past, does Parent Square itself have any we have guidelines, or can anybody who has a request say, I want it on Parent Square?
I
You know,
think
like,
that's
is there
what
some
it is.
guidelines
That's
for
what I'm afraid.
what goes up?
There's, we try to limit that access to just say because we have it and people know that, but I do try to support some of our, some community associations, I mean, maybe Pop Warner Football. You know, if they were doing something, I know we've probably done something for ASO before. And sometimes people call us and say, at least can you distribute this in the school? They provide the document to be distributed. You know, we really just make sure it's appropriate. And then allow that to be distributed in the school so long as they provide us with the material. So in some cases, you know, PTO, yes, you know, it's obviously, you know, tied in here. I know we probably put something out on there with, you know, with the foundation. Again, those are supplemental groups that support, you know, what we do here in Sauquoit Valley. I know, I don't think I've used like the Clayville Library, but we do allow them some access in our newsletter. Again, using some of the community that supports the school as well, tie them into to assist them.
Is it a voicemail or a text message?
You can do a voice, probably something like this. It might just be a post. And it goes to, I think if people have signed up for text, they'll get the text. Otherwise, it'll go to an email that they provided to us.
And is it what we use for emergencies?
Yes.
Okay.
So anytime I'm, you know,
Okay.
putting out a notice, especially notice, you know, the most common ones lately have, or, you know, the last couple of years have been, or the last year and a half have been the positive cases at our school. No, just notifying parents that, hey, we've had a positive case and operations will run as normal. Or it'll change, or we're going, you know, remote, or if that's what it dictates. But and it's been for any of our emergency closing days or delays, cancellations, things of that nature.
Okay, so there are some benefits if it doesn't get overrun with a lot of, you know.
Well, before it used to, it's nice. This has at least some multiple mechanisms of how you can get information out. You can do a post, which is just simply type it in. You put out just a news flash or whatever. Then you have where you would get a phone call, text message, and an email. And that's what I think sometimes people are enough. I keep getting calls from the school. The posting piece is something a little less intrusive, I guess, than always getting the call. So that's something I'm always balancing as well, as saying, hey, it's, you know, I try to balance how much we're using that, because sometimes there's a real important message that goes out. They look at their phones, and that's the school again. And they don't get the message. Or they call back and there's nobody to listen to unless somebody's there to catch the callback number and tell them, hey, listen to the message. There's something important in there. So that's what you run the risk of putting it out. However, I mean, in this pandemic, you know, we've tried to communicate to our community. We said we would when there were positive cases. And, at this point, we're going to continue to do that till further notice. So there has been a lot more traffic on our school messaging. Mike?
I defer to you. I'm finding my way on things. Everyone has their phone, and I'm not going to get into certain things, but for this, there's an active group of parents. I think that's great, and everyone's on their phone, and you can. It's hard for me, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't use that app. I think it's fantastic, but everyone has stuff bookmarked. You click a button, there's the Board of Education page. So, like, you know, a monkey's smarter than me, but I'm open for whatever. If you want to use the app, fine. I mean, everyone is on their phone, and literally it's like bang. I mean, you can find whatever you want. But anyway, not sure if that's appropriate, but I'm good with it.
Ron, I just want to express my feedback. The presentation tonight, I thought was very, very well done. I think they were, I don't know how you judge one over the other, but they gave a lot of information, and they seemed to be, I think the first presentation last month was good. There was something about this presentation tonight that was a little bit, it was easier to follow and a little bit more detailed. But again, I don't know how You can't judge the book.
I'm glad you brought that up.
But
because
I thought they presented well, and they brought it to a level that we could understand.
At what point do we have to make a decision on that? Or isn't that something we?
I don't know the time frame. Like we said, it can be before or after. We just, what they're voting on with the capital project, as Charlie said, is just the extra money, because we can decide on what we want to do, and then certainly once we commit to who we want to have on board as our ESCO, then we have to get them to coordinate with our architects, and so that we can try to run both projects as seamlessly as possible.
I think, in my opinion, it would be beneficial to let the community know if the board is in favor of moving forward with this energy performance contract, which I have seen nothing that would prevent us from moving forward. In terms of both presentation, I think it's going to be a benefit to our district. It's going to be a financial benefit to us in the long run over 18 years, but I think it would be beneficial to the community to know that's the intention of the board. And then when they vote in December, they know they're voting on, do we want the extra 10%? Not whether or not the board is going to go for it or is in favor of moving forward with it. I mean, if they know that ahead of time, then I think it's kind of a no-brainer.
Now, do we have to, like, can a group be approved sort of without a full commitment? Because does our commitment depend on the passing of the building project?
No, we can do, to my knowledge, if the building project doesn't get approved, we can still move forward with an energy performance contract.
Oh, okay.
We can,
yeah,
but we also want to be mindful. Are we willing to move forward if the community doesn't support getting the additional 10%? So I mean, part of that is just making sure we're clear with the community that they know when they go to the polls, one is for the project, the other one is to, we can do this, and we want the additional 10%. And I believe, well, I mean, like anything, and I can defer to Charlie, I mean, it will have minimal or at least maintain. I mean, if the project and that go hand in hand, we have the numbers of how it will look as far as the local tax effort. However, they haven't done the full scale audit. They need to come in and actually run things and put meters on things or whatever they do to get the data that they need to really hone in their numbers and kind of know, yeah, we really can support that figure we gave Sauquoit, or no, this figure changes up or down. I think.
Are there going to be?
Just to be fair to the other presentation, they had not done a walkthrough of the buildings at that time, where CNS had done that prior to coming tonight. And they both submitted their RFPs 2 weeks ago, or whatever it was, the Thursday after our last board meeting. So these guys had a lot more ammunition or information to be able to give a more uniform presentation, I think. But I think it's, at some point, if we're going to go forward, we've got to either get a committee of board members, I have to tell Ron we like to figure out who's going to be our ESCO. And, take it from
We
there.
have to have an entity performance audit prior to, correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, they'll end up doing that, especially if we select them.
Oh, okay.
They're not going to do it, put in all that effort and say, hey, thanks, we're going to go in a different direction or not do it at all. So I think at that point, once we select somebody, then they come in and do that,
whole,
and then you can fine tune those numbers.
Got it.
I mean,
Okay.
they will be in the ballpark of where they're at. I mean,
So is Dave's solution, since they put in their request for proposal, are they going to have that opportunity to come in and walk the grounds? And
They have come in and walked around. They've both done the same thing now.
so they all have done it. Okay, so they're on one. It's when Dave did their presentation, they hadn't done it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there anybody else interested?
I'm just gonna say normally how many bids?
Just the two?
Just the two.
Okay.
Do you have a preference? Either one of you?
I don't at this time, and I know we just kind of got this information, so I mean, I know Charlie and I will probably talk a little bit more about that. maybe even talk with our architects, to get a sense from there. And as Ron says, call around too.
Yeah, that was a good point.
Do some of that homework and then decide,
So I agree with all that. So are we gonna make a decision as a board? Are we gonna move forward with an energy performance contract before the vote in December or after? Are we gonna wait for the vote and make a decision?
I think we need the 10%, right? Whatever it's gonna take to get the 10% incentive, we need to do. I mean, that should be our goal.
Well, it should be the goal. That's the ultimate way, but
We should have an
if we-
ESCO in place before December 9th, so.
that's your recommendation, Charlie?
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, your personal opinion.
And keep in mind, originally it was the lighting is where we start. And then they came and did the walkthrough, and there are other efficiencies that they can recommend with paybacks. So that's what they're going to do, but we don't have to select everything that they pick. Some of it is included in the capital project.
Right.
You may want to leave it in the capital project, and maybe that's where we talk to the architect and get kind of a complementary plan.
I'm in favor of.
Because if there are things that we can do that maybe aren't in the capital project, that are in the, in the ESCO, or in the EPC, and it doesn't really change our financial picture.
Right.
Slant it too far one way or the other, that's something then definitely we want to consider. But I think given some of that information we've heard tonight, and we haven't had a lot of time to work with that on our end to see what that does financially, but something for us to consider in that conversation with our architects. We might be able to find them now that we can expand what we're doing without expanding the impact financially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I guess, would be the, if we can get to that point and get more without further impact on local share, then I think, we're following the same mindset that we're going into with the capital project. And we don't have to change course on that. And so is the thought, I guess, from the board, we'll do that work, but is, the board green light to move forward?
With an energy performance
Yes,
contract?
the EPC.
Yes, I'm in favor.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
I think we owe it to the community.
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree.
I think we owe it to a lot of people in generations moving forward.
Yes.
Over
Yeah.
the next 18 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, any other miscellaneous topics? All right. We don't have any executive session this evening.
That's correct.
All right, so then I will need a motion to adjourn at 8:57.
So moved.
Todd, I'll need a second, please.
Jim.
Jim? All
I
right.
thought it was
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
You were gonna raise your hand, weren't you?
Everyone have a good night.
You too.
Thank
Good
you.
meeting.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
let's
might
go home.
fell asleep, so I'm gonna wait a minute.
What do you
before I
get?
begin.
5 o'clock? No, 6 o'clock.
Well, I work for my hours here and I would be able to do
I got one.
That's
I
screwed.
work for the state of Detroit.
that.
Are we done?
Yeah.
Mike,
Good night, Mike.